Rejected as barren and sold off, she was chosen by a mafia boss raising 4 kids. She grew up in a quiet home in Lagos. Her father worked long hours and her mother kept everything together with patience and silent prayers. Nadia was not the kind of girl who made noise. She studied hard, kept to herself, and believed, truly believed, that if you were good and worked hard enough, life would eventually be fair to you. She became a nurse because she wanted to help people. That felt like the right reason, a pure one. When she was 26, a man named Emeka came into her life. He was well-dressed and came from a respected family. Her mother wept happy tears the day he came to ask for Nadia's hand. Her father shook his hand firmly, without even asking Nadia what she thought. The wedding was large, people danced, everyone celebrated. But on that wedding day, sitting in all her beautiful clothes, Nadia felt a small and quiet worry, sitting right in the middle of her chest. She told herself, it was just nerves. It wasn't nerves. For 3 years, she tried to be the perfect wife. She cooked before sunrise. She kept the house spotless. She smiled through every family gathering, every phone call, every visit from Emeka's mother, who would look at Nadia's stomach with that particular kind of disappointment that doesn't need words. The question came from every direction. When are you pregnant? What is taking so long? Is something wrong? Eventually, Nadia and Emeka went to the doctor together. The doctor was gentle. He explained carefully. Nadia had a condition, a hormonal issue that made natural pregnancy very difficult. Not completely impossible, he said, but very unlikely. She watched Emeka's face as the doctor spoke. Something in his eyes went quiet, like a light switching off slowly. He didn't say anything cruel. He just, slowly and quietly, stopped being her husband. He stopped asking about her day. He came home later and later. One evening, she noticed a faint smell of a different perfume on his collar, and she stood very still in the hallway for a long time, holding herself together. Then one Saturday morning, she found an envelope on the kitchen table. Divorce papers, already signed on his side. A short note said she had 2 weeks to leave the house. No argument, no conversation, just papers and a deadline. Nadia sat at that table for hours. She didn't cry straight away. She just kept reading the words, waiting for them to feel real. How could something this big, this final, happen so quietly? She called her mother. Her mother told her to beg, to go to Emeka on her knees and ask him for another chance. Nadia couldn't do it. She packed 3 bags and walked out. With nowhere to go, she stayed with her cousin Adaeze in a small apartment in Ikeja. Adaeze was kind and genuinely wanted to help, but she had her own bills, her own stress, her own life that was already too full. Nadia sent out job applications every single day, but nursing positions take time to come through, and time was the one thing she felt she didn't have. That was when Adaeze's boyfriend Roland showed up with what sounded like good news. He said there was a wealthy man in Accra who needed someone to look after his children, live-in position, private room, meals provided, a decent monthly salary. Roland made it sound like a real opportunity, a way out, a fresh start. Nadia was exhausted and had very little to choose from. She said yes. What Roland did not tell her was that he had already been paid a fee for bringing her there. That someone had looked at her situation, her loneliness, her desperation, her need, and decided she was useful. She had been, in the plainest and most painful terms, passed from one person to another like something to be placed, not a person to be considered. There were no chains, no locked room. The harm was quieter than that. She had simply been made desperate enough to walk willingly towards something she didn't fully understand. The house in East Legon, Accra, didn't look like a problem when she arrived. It looked like something from a magazine. High walls, a garden that was too perfect to be real, security guards at the gate who checked her bag carefully. She stood there with her 3 bags and felt very small. The man who came out to meet her was not what she had imagined. His name was Dominic. He was tall, broad-shouldered, maybe late 30s. He wore a plain white shirt. His face was not unkind, but it was serious in the way of people who have spent years always having to watch their surroundings. He looked at her for one brief moment and said, "You are 40 minutes late." That was his greeting. No welcome. No handshake. She followed a staff member inside and wondered quietly what kind of place she had walked into. Then she heard them. The children arrived like a small storm. The eldest was Kofi, 11 years old. He stood in the doorway with his arms crossed and looked at Nadia, the way someone looks at a thing they have stopped believing in. He had seen too many caretakers come and go from this house. His face already knew not to get used to anyone. The second was Amma, 9, who could not stop talking. She started asking questions before Nadia had even set her bag down. Could she braid hair? Did she know how to make jollof rice? How long was she planning to stay? The last caretaker had burned the jollof, she said, and the one before that had cried every day, and that made everyone feel uncomfortable. Then there was Kwame, 7 years old. He stood slightly behind his siblings and said nothing, but his eyes followed everything carefully. And finally, Abina, 4 years old, in a yellow dress with one sock on and one sock missing. She was carrying a stuffed elephant, old and worn, loved almost down to nothing. She walked straight across the room, stopped in front of Nadia, looked up with calm and serious eyes and said, "You look sad." Nadia crouched down to her level. "I am just tired," she said. Abina thought about this very carefully. Then she held out her elephant. "Yaw can keep you company. He helps when you feel bad." Nadia took the little elephant gently, and something deep inside her, something she had kept locked up tight for a long time, cracked open just a little. Over the following days, she learned more about Dominic. The staff didn't talk much, but she was a trained nurse. She knew how to read situations and people. Dominic ran businesses that operated in gray areas, things that were difficult to question and harder to fully understand. He had a reputation that made people careful around him, but he was also a father who had lost his wife 2 years earlier. Her name had been Sirwa. She died in a car accident. In the time since, Dominic had hired 6 different caretakers for his 4 children. None had lasted more than 3 months. The children needed someone to stay. They had stopped believing anyone would. Nadia didn't come in with big speeches or promises. She just got to work. She brought routine to a house that had been running on confusion. Meal times that were consistent, bedtimes that were actually enforced, homework done at the table before anything else. When Kofi told her she wasn't his mother, and he didn't have to do what she said, she didn't raise her voice. She just said, quietly, that he was right. She wasn't his mother. But this was how things would go while she was here. He could be as angry as he needed to be and still do his homework. He did his homework. Amma attached herself to Nadia within a week. She followed her from room to room and asked questions from morning to evening. Big questions, small questions, and some that didn't have easy answers. Kwame began leaving small crayon drawings outside Nadia's bedroom door. Pictures of the garden, of his siblings, and eventually, a drawing of a woman with a bag standing next to the family. He never said anything about the drawings. He just left them there, quietly, one by one. Abena climbed into Nadia's lap one morning without asking, and fell asleep. Nadia sat completely still for a long time, afraid to move even a little. Dominic noticed all of it. He was a man trained to pay close attention to everything around him, and what he saw in those weeks made him go quiet, in a way he hadn't expected. The dinner table wasn't tense anymore. Abena had stopped waking up crying in the night. Kofi was laughing again, carefully, slowly, like someone relearning something they had almost forgotten. The real turning point came 3 months in, at 2 in the morning. Abena had a high fever. When Dominic came down the hallway, he found Nadia already there. She was sitting beside Abena's bed, holding her small hand, speaking to her in a low and gentle voice. A cool cloth was folded neatly across Abena's forehead. A glass of water with a straw sat ready on the bedside table. Everything was calm, handled. There was no panic, no confusion. Just one person who knew exactly what to do, doing it without being asked. Dominic stood in the doorway for a long moment. Then he sat down on the other side of the bed without saying a word. The two of them stayed like that through the night, one on each side of Abena, until the fever finally broke just before dawn. When Abena drifted into deep, comfortable sleep, Dominic looked across the bed at Nadia. He asked her about her life. She told him. The marriage. The diagnosis, the quiet divorce, the small apartment, Roland, and his offer, and what it had really meant, she told him plainly. The way you speak about something that has already finished hurting you. When she mentioned Roland, Dominic's face went very still. You knew, she said. I suspected, he replied. I will handle it. After that night, they began to talk more. Not every evening, but often enough. He told her about Surwa, about the guilt he carried from an argument they'd had the night of the accident, about how he wasn't sure how to be the father his children truly needed, about what the life he had chosen had slowly cost him on the inside. Nadia listened without rushing him or trying to fix everything. She didn't pretend his world was clean, but she also didn't reduce him to just his worst parts. 4 months after she arrived, Dominic sat down across from her at the kitchen table, her table now, the one she had turned into a place for meals and homework and the small daily moments of ordinary peace, and told her he wanted her to stay. Not as an employee, as something real. He placed a document in front of her, one that gave her the full and legal right to leave at any time, her own financial security, her own standing in the household. He told her he wasn't trying to buy her answer. He just wanted her choice to actually be her own. A real one, not born from fear or having nowhere else to go. I cannot have children, she said, quietly. I have 4, he replied. They already decided about you. I am just the last one to say it out loud. That night, Kofi knocked on her door. He stood in the doorway looking at the floor and asked, in the quietest voice she had ever heard from him, if she was leaving. She told him she didn't know yet. He nodded slowly, then said, almost like he was saying it to himself rather than to her. Kwame never draws pictures for people. He has drawn 11 for you. He walked away before she could say a single word back. She went to her dresser and counted the small crayon drawings stacked carefully on one side. 11. She said yes, the next morning. Not because everything had suddenly become simple. It hadn't. The road ahead was complicated, and she knew it. The man she was saying yes to carried real weight, and that wouldn't disappear overnight. But she had spent years being told she wasn't enough. Not enough to keep a husband. Not enough to be considered a real woman by the people who were supposed to love her. Not enough to matter. She had nearly believed it all the way down to her bones. But 4 children had decided differently. One of them had once offered her a worn-out stuffed elephant and told her it would help. And somehow, impossibly, it had. A year later, the compound felt like a completely different world. Abena turned 5 and decided, with complete certainty, that her birthday party needed exactly 32 balloons. She could not explain why 32. She just knew. Nadia found every single one. Kwame started talking more. At first slowly and carefully, then all at once, like something that had been holding itself back for too long finally letting go. He told Nadia he wanted to be an architect. He had already designed 17 imaginary buildings in his sketchbook. He showed her every one of them, explaining each detail with the seriousness of someone who had been thinking about it for a very long time. Amma came 3rd in a regional science competition and gave an acceptance speech so detailed and so long that the judges eventually had to very gently bring it to a close. Kofi stopped crossing his arms when Nadia walked into the room. He started coming to her with quiet questions, the kind a boy on the edge of becoming a teenager has but no one else to ask. She answered every one without making him feel small for asking, and Dominic started coming home earlier. The people who had once decided that Nadia's value could be measured, who had weighed everything she was against what her body could or could not do, and passed her along when she didn't fit what they wanted, never got to see any of this. But Nadia did, every single day, and that was more than enough.